The bank's glass doors gleamed, reflecting the awakening world outside, the slow trickle of early risers, the shuffle of feet on the pavement, and the occasional bark of a dog greeting the dawn. Inside, the air buzzed softly with the hum of fluorescent lights overhead and the faint clatter of keyboards tapping out the day's beginning. The scent of freshly brewed coffee, rich and comforting, mingled with the distinct but gentle aroma of paper, ledger books, deposit slips, and polished wood, the kind of smell that spoke of tradition and care. Behind the counter stood Marjorie Ellis, an elderly black woman whose silver hair was neatly pinned back in a bun, a few delicate wisps framing her face, a map of years marked by laughter, struggle, and quiet triumph. Her dark eyes, sharp and clear beneath her round glasses, scanned the room with serene vigilance. She adjusted her glasses on the bridge of her nose, smiled gently at the few patrons waiting in line, and smoothed the soft beige cardigan draped over a floral blouse that seemed to hold memories of decades past. Her posture was poised yet relaxed, a subtle strength that radiated calm. The clock on the wall ticked steadily toward 9, its soft clicks blending with the background sounds. The low murmur of early conversations, the shuffle of feet on the polished floor, the occasional beep of a scanner. Outside, passers-by ambled leisurely, some glancing at the bank's shiny windows, others lost in their morning routines. The smell of freshly baked bread wafting from the corner bakery mixing with the faint, sweet scent of blooming honeysuckle creeping along a nearby fence. Inside, the quiet hum of financial transactions and polite exchanges painted the usual picture of small-town banking life. A world where time moved measuredly, and people trusted that things would remain steady, dependable as the rising sun. But beneath the polished surface, a tension simmered, a subtle undercurrent barely noticeable, yet palpable to those who knew where to look. It was a tension born of unspoken frustrations, of changing times, and of the fragile human dignity that could so easily be overlooked. That tension, invisible to most, would soon surface with a force no one expected, shaking the calm of Brooksville Trust Bank and rippling through Marjorie's life forever. Marjorie Ellis had lived all her 74 years in Brooksville. She often said the town was stitched into her soul like the patchwork quilts her grandmother had sewn, each piece holding a story, a memory, a lesson. Born in a modest home on the outskirts of town, she was raised by her grandmother, a woman of iron will and gentle love, whose hands had labored through fields and kitchens alike. From a young age, Marjorie learned the value of hard work, resilience, and dignity. Her grandmother's stories, told by the light of a flickering kerosene lamp during long summer evenings, spoke of resilience during harsh times, segregation, poverty, and heartbreak. Those stories stirred a quiet fire in Marjorie's soul, a determination to stand tall no matter the odds. Every morning, long before dawn cracked open the sky, Marjorie woke to the soft chime of her alarm clock. The world outside was still wrapped in slumber's embrace, but inside her small kitchen, warmth began to bloom. She brewed a pot of strong coffee, the rich, dark liquid filling the room with its inviting scent, laced with a hint of cinnamon she added herself, a ritual comfort. She sat by her small kitchen window, gazing out at the sun's slow climb over the fields beyond the town, where golden hay bales were stacked neatly in the distance like sentinels guarding the land. Those fields, rolling and quiet, reminded her of childhood summers spent running barefoot through the tall grass, the scent of fresh hay mingling with wildflowers and earth. She remembered the warmth of the sun on her skin, the soft hum of cicadas, and the occasional distant call of a hawk circling overhead. Those memories were a balm to her spirit, a reminder of simpler times and the unbroken connection to the land and community. Her daily routine was simple but meaningful. After a light breakfast, a slice of homemade cornbread with a smear of butter, she dressed carefully, choosing clothes that reflected her pride and respect for herself and those she served. The soft rustle of fabric was a small but deliberate act of dignity. She walked the 2 blocks to the bank, greeting neighbors with a nod or a soft good morning, exchanging smiles that spoke of shared histories and mutual respect. At the bank, Marjorie handled each transaction with care, listening patiently to customers' stories and concerns. She knew many by name: the young mother saving for her child's education, the retired farmer managing a modest pension, the local teacher balancing budgets on a tight salary. To them, Marjorie was more than a teller. She was a pillar in their community, a steady presence in a world that often felt precarious. She volunteered at the local food pantry, attended church services on Sundays, and kept a treasured ritual of writing letters to her son James, who had moved to the city years ago to pursue his dreams. Their letters were a lifeline, connecting mother and son across miles and time, filled with love, advice, and quiet encouragement. Though quiet, Marjorie's life was rich with love and memory, yet beneath her calm exterior, she carried the weight of unspoken fears, concerns about aging, about being overlooked, and about holding on to her dignity in a world that sometimes seemed indifferent. Today, those fears would be tested in a way she could never have imagined. The morning unfolded like any other, the usual rhythm of greetings, transactions, and soft chatter filling the bank's spacious interior. The polished wood of the counters gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and the soft carpet muted footsteps, creating a cocoon of calm. Then, a sharp voice cut through the soft murmur like a crack of thunder. Richard Hargrove, the bank's manager, a tall man with a stern jaw and cold gray eyes, stood behind the counter. His expression was tight, his brows knitted with impatience. He was known for his strict policies and little tolerance for mistakes, but today his gaze lingered longer on Marjorie than usual, a flicker of disdain hidden beneath practiced civility. A young man approached the counter, visibly flustered, clutching a check that refused to process correctly. His hands trembled slightly, and beads of sweat dotted his forehead as he stammered, I'm sorry, ma'am, but this check, it won't go through." Marjorie moved with her usual grace, her fingers tracing the worn edges of the check, her voice gentle but firm. "It seems there's a discrepancy here," she explained kindly, "but I'll help you sort it out. Sometimes banks like ours need a little extra time to verify." Richard's mouth twisted into a sneer. "This is ridiculous. We don't have time for this nonsense," he barked, his voice sharp and cold. "Marjorie, just get it done. This isn't a charity." The room grew tense. Customers shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting between Richard and Marjorie, the atmosphere thickening as if the very air held its breath. The scent of polished wood and paper seemed to thicken, the comforting hum of the bank's machinery fading into an oppressive silence. Marjorie's hands trembled slightly, but she kept her voice steady, her calm a fragile shield. "I'm doing my best, Richard. This check needs verification before we can proceed. It's important we do things right." Richard scoffed, his tone dipping into cruel mockery. "Best? Your best isn't good enough anymore." Without warning, his hand shot out, striking Marjorie's cheek with a sharp, stinging slap. Gasps echoed through the bank. Time seemed to freeze. Marjorie's eyes widened in shock, a tear tracing a slow path down her cheek, catching the light like a fragile jewel. The customers, stunned and uncertain, exchanged glances, unsure whether to intervene or stay silent. Richard laughed cruelly, his voice dripping with contempt. "You're too old to keep up, Marjorie. Maybe it's time you retired." His words were not just an attack on her competence, but a deliberate attempt to humiliate, to strip away the dignity she had upheld for decades. Then, through the thick silence, heavy footsteps approached, the sound of something powerful arriving to shatter the moment. The door to the bank swung open with a sharp creak, and all eyes turned toward the entrance. A tall, broad-shouldered man stood framed by the morning light, his presence commanding immediate attention. James Ellis, Marjorie's son, had returned to Brooksville after years away, his dark eyes scanning the room with a mixture of concern and quiet fury. His gaze landed on his mother, who sat motionless, shock and pain etched deep across her face. The manager's mocking smile faltered as James strode forward, his voice steady but filled with a simmering fire. "What's going on here?" The bank fell into a hush. The customers who had been frozen in place now watched as James stood protectively beside Marjorie, his posture rigid with determination. His presence was like a shield, a promise that the humiliation would not go unanswered. Richard straightened, attempting to regain control, but the weight of the moment was palpable. James's calm authority cut through the tension, demanding respect without raising his voice. Marjorie blinked back tears, her heart pounding wildly in her chest. The arrival of her son brought a surge of hope she hadn't expected. The quiet strength of family and justice now filled the room, setting the stage for a confrontation that would change everything. Outside, the scent of fresh hay from the nearby fields drifted in on a gentle breeze, a fragrant reminder of roots and resilience that no cruelty could sever. James Ellis's eyes locked onto the manager, Richard Hargrove, who now seemed smaller under the weight of his son's unwavering gaze. The murmurs within the bank grew louder, whispers of disbelief turning into murmurs of support for Marjorie. James's voice was calm but insistent as he addressed the room. "Everyone here just witnessed something unacceptable," he said, his tone steady but resolute. "My mother deserves respect and dignity, just like every one of you." He turned to Richard, his eyes blazing with quiet fire. "You will apologize and ensure this never happens again." Richard's face flushed with anger, veins tightening in his neck, but he found himself cornered. The customers, once frozen, now exchanged nods and whispered agreements, emboldened by James's presence. The bank's atmosphere shifted from shock to resolve. James took his mother's hand gently in his own, feeling the tremble beneath her skin. "Mom, I'm here now. We'll make this right." Marjorie squeezed his hand, drawing strength from his presence, the knot of fear loosening ever so slightly. The bank manager, begrudgingly and with a muttered apology, tried to save face, but the damage was done. James knew an apology was only the first step. The incident had exposed deeper issues of respect and fairness that needed addressing. Outside, the warm scent of hay from the nearby fields mingled with the crisp spring air, a symbol of renewal and the promise of change. James began making calls, his voice firm and purposeful, determined to rally community support. Marjorie, though shaken, felt a new sense of hope. The fight for dignity had just begun. Despite James's tireless efforts, resistance surfaced quickly. The bank's corporate office downplayed the incident, viewing it as an isolated misunderstanding, a blip in an otherwise orderly operation. James found himself navigating a maze of cold bureaucracy, official memos, scripted apologies, and meetings that felt like performances rather than solutions. The sterile smell of office air conditioning and paper filled the rooms where he pleaded for justice. Marjorie noticed the subtle shifts too. Some regular customers stopped coming in, fearful of controversy or unsure where they stood. Others whispered about the incident, their voices tinged with uncertainty, discomfort, or even quiet condemnation. The bank's once warm atmosphere grew colder, the scent of polished wood mingling with unspoken tension. At home, James and Marjorie pored over letters, notes, and community petitions, planning their next moves. The scent of old paper and ink reminded Marjorie of the letters she had sent to her son over the years. Letters filled with love, quiet strength, and unwavering faith. The worn pages were a testament to their connection across distance and time. James's frustration grew, but he refused to give up. He reached out to local activists, community leaders, and journalists, hoping to turn the tide of indifference. The hay bales stacked in the fields outside became a strange comfort, steady, patient, enduring like the spirit they were trying to rekindle. Marjorie, watching the sun set beyond the fields in a blaze of gold and crimson, found her resolve hardening. The bank incident was more than an attack on her. It was a wound to the community's soul, Together, mother and son prepared to face the obstacles ahead, knowing the road would be long and difficult, but necessary. In the days that followed, James and Marjorie found solace in each other's company. Their bond, forged by years apart and bridged now by shared struggle, grew stronger amid the turmoil. They spent evenings on Marjorie's porch, the air heavy with the sweet scent of blooming honeysuckle curling around the wooden railings. The distant rustle of hay bales in the twilight breeze added a soft, almost musical backdrop to their conversations. James listened intently to his mother's stories, her voice steady despite the pain, revealing the depth of her wisdom and resilience shaped by decades. Marjorie, in turn, saw the man her son had become, a leader with compassion, courage, and a quiet fire that matched her own. He shared his own struggles in the city, the challenges of balancing ambition and identity, the loneliness of being away from home, and the burden of responsibility he now carried. Together they found common ground, healing wounds long hidden beneath layers of silence. The community began to rally quietly around them. Neighbors stopped by with words of encouragement, cups of coffee wrapped in napkins, and small gestures of solidarity that spoke louder than grand speeches. Marjorie's presence in the bank became a symbol of endurance, and James's involvement a beacon of hope and change. Through shared meals, hearty stews and fresh-baked bread, heartfelt conversations, and moments of quiet reflection under the stars, the mother and son nurtured a new strength. The hay bales outside, glowing softly in the moonlight, stood as silent witnesses to their journey, a testament to patience, persistence, and love. With each passing day, Marjorie found her confidence returning. She stood taller at the bank, greeting customers with renewed warmth and quiet pride, her smile carrying a new light. The sting of the past incident lingered beneath the surface, but it no longer defined her. Instead, it fueled a determination to reclaim her dignity and power. James supported her every step, attending meetings with the bank's leadership and community forums. Their voices, once tentative and burdened by fear, now carried conviction and clarity. At town hall gatherings, their words stirred conversations long avoided, drawing out stories and demands for respect and fairness. Marjorie began organizing community events, financial literacy workshops at the local community center, open discussions about respect and inclusion in workplaces. Her gentle voice inspired others to speak out, turning collective pain into purpose and action. The scent of fresh hay from the nearby fields became a metaphor for growth and renewal. Just as farmers tended their crops through storms and droughts, Marjorie and James nurtured hope amid adversity. They planted seeds of change in the hearts of Brooksville's people, sowing the belief that respect and dignity were rights, not privileges. Tensions reached a breaking point when Richard Hargrove was called into a formal hearing at the bank's headquarters. The community watched closely, divided between those demanding justice and those urging caution and order. On the day of the hearing, James and Marjorie gathered with supporters in the crowded lobby, the air thick with anticipation and the faint smell of coffee and polished wood. Faces familiar and new filled the space, friends, neighbors, and advocates united by a shared purpose. Inside the hearing room, voices rose as accusations flew. Richard denied wrongdoing, painting the incident as a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. But witnesses spoke out, sharing their experiences and affirming Marjorie's dignity and character. The room crackled with tension, the air heavy with the weight of truth and consequence. The pressure mounted. James felt the weight of responsibility pressing down, the need to stand firm despite exhaustion and frustration. Marjorie's steady presence beside him bolstered his resolve, her quiet strength the grounding force amid the storm. Outside, the golden hay bales shimmered under the sun, a steadfast reminder of endurance and the cycles of nature, growth, challenge, and renewal. The hearing ended with Richard's suspension pending further investigation, a significant, though not final, victory. The bank issued a public apology, promising reforms and a commitment to inclusivity. It was not the end, but a crucial turning point. Marjorie returned to her routine with a sense of cautious optimism. The customers who had drifted away began returning, some with tears and heartfelt apologies. The community's support deepened, fueled by shared experiences and a renewed hope for a better future. James and Marjorie continued their work, their bond unbreakable, and strengthened by trials overcome. They spoke at schools and community centers, sharing their story to inspire resilience, courage, and the fight for dignity. The fields outside, dotted with hay bales now turning amber in the late summer sun, symbolized the journey they had traveled, a testament to patience, strength, and the promise of harvest after hardship. Months later, the fight was far from over. James and Marjorie learned that Richard planned to contest the suspension and return to his position. The news struck like a thunderclap, threatening to undo the fragile peace they had built. Together, they prepared for the inevitable confrontation. They met with lawyers, gathered testimonies, and rallied community leaders. Marjorie revisited the bank daily, her presence a quiet, unwavering challenge to injustice. Her steps echoed softly in the polished halls, a measured defiance. The scent of hay from the fields outside seemed sharper, the earth readying for change as surely as the people prepared their voices and hearts. James trained himself to remain calm in the face of provocation, drawing on lessons from his mother's resilience and quiet dignity. Nights were filled with strategy sessions and moments of reflection. Marjorie's hands trembled less now, steady as she held the letters from her son and the community's support close to her chest. They knew this was more than a personal battle. It was a stand for dignity, respect, and the soul of their town. The day of Richard's return arrived under a sky heavy with clouds, the air thick with tension. The bank was alive with whispers and nervous glances. Employees and customers alike shared anxious looks. James and Marjorie stood near the entrance, surrounded by community members ready to witness the moment and stand firm. Richard entered with a forced, brittle smile, his eyes darting nervously across the room. Marjorie met his gaze, unflinching and steady, the quiet fire in her eyes silencing the murmurs. When he approached the counter, James stepped forward, his voice ringing clear and firm. "This community will not forget what happened here," he declared. "We demand respect, accountability, and change." Richard's facade cracked, a flicker of fear crossing his features. Voices rose from the gathered crowd, customers began to speak out, and the bank's atmosphere shifted from fear to empowerment, as if a heavy cloud had lifted. In a decisive moment, the board announced Richard's permanent removal, affirming the community's demand for dignity and justice. A collective breath seemed to release, and the tension dissolved into cheers and quiet tears. The scent of fresh hay drifted through the open doors, mingling with the sounds of celebration, a symbol of renewal and victory. With Richard gone, the bank began to transform. New leadership prioritized respect and inclusivity, listening closely to the voices of the community. Marjorie's role was celebrated, her experience and wisdom finally recognized and valued. James and Marjorie worked together to establish a community advisory board, ensuring voices like theirs shaped the future of the bank and the town. The board became a platform for dialogue and progress, a place of healing. The town rallied around them, healing old wounds and building bridges across divides. The fields outside, where hay bales stood tall and golden under a wide sky, became a place for community gatherings, celebrations, and quiet reflection. Marjorie found peace in knowing her dignity had been restored and that her story would inspire others to stand strong. James felt pride in standing by his mother and their shared fight, their bond stronger than ever. Together they had changed Brooksville, not just the bank, but the heart of their community. Years later, the bank on Main Street thrived under new leadership, a beacon of hope, respect, and community spirit. Marjorie, now retired, often sat on her porch, the scent of hay and honeysuckle filling the warm summer air. She rocked gently in her chair, watching the sun dip low over the fields, the golden hay bales glowing softly in the fading light. James visited regularly, their bond unbreakable and deepened by the trials they had faced together. They shared quiet moments, reminiscing, laughing, and simply being, watching the cycles of nature that mirrored their own journey. The struggle had forged a new balance, one where dignity, resilience, and love triumphed over cruelty and fear. Marjorie smiled softly, knowing that her story and her son's courage had sown seeds for a better future. The journey had tested them, but from the ashes rose a community united and strong. And in the quiet town of Brooksville, beneath skies wide and open, hope flourished like the fields, steady, enduring, and alive. Fine della narrazione.